Later, when actually incarcerated in the jail, Joseph the prophet turned to the guards who held him captive and bore a powerful testimony of the divine authenticity of the Book of Mormon. Shortly thereafter, pistol and ball would take the lives of these two testators. As one of 1,000 elements of my own testimony of the divinity of the Book of Mormon, I submit this as yet one more evidence of its truthfulness.
Elder Holland keeps claiming that reading a couple of verses and talking to a guard about the Book of Mormon are strong evidences for the divine origins of the Book of Mormon. These two events, which happen days apart and are only loosely linked by Elder Holland in this talk, had very little, if anything, to do with the official story about the origin of the Book of Mormon. This is a logical fallacy, and it ends up being simply an appeal to his authority.
In this their greatest and last hour of need, I ask you, would these men blaspheme before God by continuing to fix their lives, their honor, and their own search for eternal salvation on a book, and by implication a church and a ministry they had fictitiously created out of whole cloth?
As I've talked a little bit about before, it is likely that Joseph and Hiram did not know that they were about to die. And even if they did not have an opportunity to avoid their fate by recanting the Book of Mormon. Hiram had nothing to do with the creation of the Book of Mormon, so his belief in the book makes it no truer than the 9/11 terrorists' belief in the Quran made it true. And in that case, it literally was part of their dying testimony, much more so than the Book of Mormon was for Hiram.
Never mind that their wives are about to be widows and their children fatherless. Never mind that their little band of followers will yet be houseless, homeless, and friendless, and that their children will leave footprints of blood across frozen rivers and an untamed prairie floor. Never mind that legions will die and other legions live, declaring in the four quarters of this earth that they know the Book of Mormon and the church which it espouses it to be true. Disregard all of that.
Elder Holland tells a series of heart-rendering events, and they really are, as if Joseph and Hiram knew them ahead of time. And it implies that these were a known consequence of a fictitious deal that they were never offered. Holland uses this logical fallacy to get an emotional response from his audience, to draw them in. But his point is not logical or historically factual, but it's designed to manipulate the listener's feelings so they don't really think about what he is saying.
And tell me whether in this hour of death these two men would enter the presence of their eternal judge, quoting from and finding solace in a book which, if not the very word of God, would brand them as impostors and charlatans until the end of time.
There is no evidence that Joseph and Hiram were comforting each other by reading the Book of Mormon within the hour of their death, as Holland refers to. Holland makes the point of the dichotomy of Mormonism by painting Joseph Smith as either being the true prophet, and linked to the truthfulness, and that claim being linked to the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon, by the way, or an impostor and a charlatan. It was wrong of Holland to apply this dichotomy to Hiram, since he was not involved in the book's creation. It's possible that he truly believed in the Book of Mormon, even with Joseph Smith creating it in a different way than he claimed.
They would not do that.
Are you sure? How do you know? With absolute certainty, Holland asserts that if either Joseph or Hiram doubted the divinity of the Book of Mormon, they would not have read a couple of verses several days before. Actually, just Hiram wouldn't have read it a couple of days before. Joseph apparently didn't read it. This is presumptuous at best, since he cannot know the mind and will of these men at the time. And if we're going to look at what people do right before they know they are going to die, then do we have to take into account the testimony of Jim Jones and David Koresh and the Applewhite guy who was part of the Heaven Gates cult as their dying testimonies being absolutely true because they knew they were going to go die and meet God? You need to have the same standard for across the board, because Joseph is not unique in having done this.
They were willing to die rather than deny the divine origin and the eternal truthfulness of the Book of Mormon.
Again, there's no evidence for this. They were never offered a chance to save their lives by the mob or by the jailers or by the governor of Illinois by denying the Book of Mormon. They were not in jail because of their testimony of the Book of Mormon. They were in jail because Joseph destroyed a printing press that exposed the practice of polygamy and said some derogatory things about him. The Book of Mormon has nothing to do with their murder, and this statement is complete non sequitur. The fact that Holland is building his argument on the strong evidence of events that turn out didn't happen should give any listener, especially members, concern.
For 179 years, this book has been examined and attacked, denied and deconstructed, targeted and torn apart, like perhaps no other book in modern religious history, perhaps like no other book in any religious history. And still it stands. Failed theories about its origins have been born, parroted, and died. From Ethan Smith to Solomon Spaulding to deranged paranoid to cunning genius.
Since he doesn't bother to analyze them here, I have to wonder why Holland considers these naturalistic theories failed. What criteria is he using? Anything other than his own religious bias? I don't want to go into too much detail about these other theories, but I will briefly describe each of these failed theories, all of which are the subject of ongoing research, hundreds of years after they were first proposed, and have not died, as Elder Holland wishes they had. Ethan Smith published a book called View of the Hebrews in 1823, which LDS Church General Authority B.H. Roberts said contained striking parallels in content and storyline with the Book of Mormon. Ethan Smith knew Oliver Cowdery, who was Joseph Smith's second cousin, and who worked with Joseph Smith to produce the Book of Mormon. The theory is that Joseph, or perhaps Oliver Cowdery, could have used this book as foundational material for creating the Book of Mormon. Solomon Spaulding wrote a manuscript which went missing from a Pittsburgh print shop which Sidney Rigdon frequented in the proper time frame from 1812 to 1816. This manuscript is purported to be foundational material for the Book of Mormon, according to this theory, to which Sidney Rigdon added his Campbellite doctrines. Rigdon met Oliver Cowdery when Cowdery was working in Ohio in the district in which Sidney was a circuit preacher. Oliver, who was Joseph's second cousin, introduced Sidney to Joseph, and both were interested in bringing forth a book that regarding the origins of the Native Americans. Now, the current scholarship suggests that there is an overlap between the Ethan Smith and the Solomon Spaulding theories. Deranged paranoid is Holland's way to describe a range of theories surrounding Joseph's presumed mental illness. The theory is that the altered mental states of Joseph Smith created scenarios in which he purportedly wrote the Book of Mormon. The phrase cunning genius is his way to describe the theory that Joseph Smith was a genius con man who wrote the Book of Mormon by himself in order to save his family from their poverty. And that is supported by the fact that Joseph Smith did try to sell the copyright of the Book of Mormon shortly after its initial publication.
None of these frankly pathetic answers for this book has ever withstood examination.
Anyway, Holland does not tell us why these naturalistic theories are frankly pathetic, just that they are. He is resorting to name-calling, not just of the theories, but anyone who accepts an explanation other than the official church story. Not only have these naturalistic theories withstood examination, they are still being investigated and modified as new evidence comes to light every year. Holland is trying to discourage members from considering any of these alternative theories by calling them names and degrading anybody who subscribes to them. Now, is he really afraid of an unbiased scholarly investigation on the subject of the origin of the Book of Mormon? If the origin story is true, he should welcome it.